Hey everyone, welcome to another video on the channel, and in today's video I have the Spell Fusion tier list for y'all. Now, I was going to have this out like 4 days ago, but it was my birthday. I had a blast for like 2 days straight. My girlfriend got me Black Ops 6, been having a lot of fun on that game and zombies, and also I went to go see the new Venom movie, which I thought was really good. And then when I could actually sit down and work on my video, my internet was basically out for like 8 hours. Anyways, how I'm gonna do things since we have a lot of spells is I'm gonna try and put them into categories and organize them. So starting off with the PVE Dual Blades, I think these are actually pretty good. You can sharpen and stack them as well, which makes them really good. Just an extra buff to stack in PVE. And the fact that an energy blade is like 55 blades if you sharpen it, it's just absolutely incredible. Same thing with the dual school traps. They're also really good. Now let's talk about the auras, because the auras, a lot of players were excited for them, myself included. I was extremely hyped, thinking we'd see like some really cool new like kick-ass auras, but unfortunately they just aren't very good. So the life auras, for example, just are not good, simply because in PvE you're better off just simply clicking Frenzy. And in PvP, it's 1 pip to do something that is just gonna get countered the next round when the counter is 0 pips. So you'll be looking like a dumbass spending pips on an aura. However, the negative aura one I think is actually a little bit better. And the reason I say this is because you can actually treat this as a counter in PvP. Also, in PvE, this is a new unique buff in the game, which I do think is great. Next up, all of the burst damage Selenopolis spells that are rank 7 pip. I think all of these spells are just really not good. The reason I say that simply is because, well, they are basically equal to a 4 plus school pip value, which basically means a 6 pip hit is literally equal to this. So for example, if we take the Storm one, this is technically the value of a 6 pip Storm Ninja Pigs, but for some reason they made it 7 pips, which is the most moronic thing. So essentially what I'm saying is there's just no point in running it, because other schools will have a better DPP card for 1 less pip, and the schools that already have it are just going to use their card that they have that is 6 pips for the same damage. However, the one exception I will say is the new life spell, which is a 1545 burst heal for 7 pips. Now, I think this spell is actually pretty good. Now, it's probably going to be competing with like Dryad for Jades in PvE. Dryad is a really good spell. I'm not sure if they'd rather pack this or that, but I think this spell is actually really good for PvE players. Obviously, in PvP it's banned because burst heals are not allowed, but I think that spell for PvE, not bad at all. Okay, so let's do all of the fire overtime utilities now. These ones are like 5 pip fire hits, essentially, that you get by weaving into fire. It will basically give you 2 dots, 1 for fire and 1 for your school, that lasts 4 rounds. So honestly, not terrible. When I first saw this card, I thought it was kind of bad, I'm not gonna lie, but the more I think about it, it's kind of growing on me a little bit, so I think just putting it somewhere in B tier isn't a terrible idea. It could be good, it could have some usages in the future. Okay, next up, let's do the utility paths of the new spells we got in Selenopolis. So, starting off with the fire one, this is going to be a 600 damage burst hit for 6 pips that also clears 5 traps on you for 35 traps on the opponent. So this spell is very similar to Fire Dragon, but instead of getting dots, you get burst damage now and fire traps. So I think this spell is actually really good. It's going to be competing with Fire Dragon in terms like the slot. It could replace Fire Dragon because it is 1 less pip, and fires also are struggling to find a lot of good burst hits in general. So I think it's just a pretty solid card. Next up, we got the Storm spell, the Heket's Strike. I think this spell is probably S tier, probably A plus, low S tier, but I think this spell is really good. It's solid damage. The pip cost is a little much, but I mean, considering the amount of damage it does in 330 blades, I think it's just really good. If or when the devs do decide to butcher and basically just ban Catch of the Day, this would probably be the next spell that Storm Wizards are going to shift into and run. Next up, we have Heket's Curse, which is a 6 pip, 785 damage, and then put on a 4-round harmful aura on the opponent. Again, just a really, really solid spell. It's 1 less pip than the other one, so you might see it be used a little bit more, but it's a really good way to hit, get some tempo, and keep your opponent at bay. So think of like the Myth matchup, for example, right? It's where you can't really debuff a Myth, but now you can chip them down and actually debuff them with this spell. So I think it's also just a really, really good spell. The last utility spell for Heket, we have a 4 pip, 570 damage, and minus 30% chromatic damage aura on if you have a heal overtime on. Now, I think this spell is actually also really good. Reason being, having a Wine Hot on a Storm is not very hard to get. Like, you can Leprechaun, Berry, Rebirth, right? And honestly, the damage is not terrible. It's a pretty low pip cost. I think it's just a pretty fair deal. A lot of the Storm spells this update got nice with Heket, which is nice, but their actual fusion spells are not that good, and you'll see that a bit down the line here. Alright, let's finish up the Amut. So this one is a 7 pip, 320 burst, and then 920 2 overtimes over 5 rounds. So essentially, this is like the old Salamander in 4th Age when you could like enchant it. It's kind of back, but now it's 7 pips instead of 6. So I think this spell again is also really freaking good for fires. Next up, we have Amut's Rage. This is a 7 pip, 735 burst damage hit that also puts on a fuel on the opponent. Again, just a really, really solid spell. I don't think any of these spells are quite S tier. You could argue that they are, but I think they're just, you know, good where they are good, essentially. Next up, we have the Life Hippo. All of these spells are just insanely broken in PvP. We have had a problem with trading for quite a long time in PvP, and before we saw these spells, people were already predicting Life to be the best school, but on top of that, we saw the counters get worse against Life, and then we basically have another rebirth coming to the game with this update with the Hippo Lady, and it's going to be really obnoxious and OP. So definitely see Life be, you know, queued #1, top of the boards when this patch drops. Next up, we have the bounce spells. These ones are really, really, really insane. At worst, you could say they're A tier, nothing lower than that. I would say the worst one is like the hit and hex for 4 rounds, but the one where you get a chromatic hit and then 5 pip backs if you have a negative aura on you is insane. And the other one is a hit and minus 25% 6-round brace, just like all the way back in Caramel, but they can spam it and hit while doing it for pretty decent damage. The myth spells, I think are kind of okay. I would say the hit and overtime one is basically just like Mander in a sense. It's a little weaker on the burst, and the OT is a little better, and it does last a little longer, so like it's not terrible. Next up, we have a type of Minotaur spell that gives you a fuel at the end, so that is pretty good. I'm gonna put this one in B tier. Reason being, simply it just doesn't really fit in with the whole like myth PVE meta that's going on right now. I want to say I think it's not a terrible spell, but you're not really gonna have the chance to do this and like do something else later on in the match. I guess like maybe against an ice it could be good, but I'd say generally it's mid at best. Last one, we have a 7 pip, again double hit, and then 2 -60 tower shields per overtime on the opponent. Again, I think it's kind of mid. It's not bad, but it's very situational. Next up, we have the ice spells. Now, ice, this update is going to easily be like a top 3, top 4 school. And I've actually been saying this on the channel for quite a long time, and everyone thought I was absolutely insane. But now people are starting to see that I am right. So literally all of ice's spells this update are just literally S tier. They are insane. You have a hit and then ice fuel. You have this spell right here, the shoe one, a hit clear negative aura for 45 fuel. Hands down the best card in this update. This spell needs to get nerfed. It's nuts. Next up, we have Death. Now, Death essentially got a catch of the day, but they don't need a skull pip for it. So it's a 4 55 damage hit and then 2 30% death blades for 5 pips. Now, I think this is easily an A tier card for Death Wizards. Again, it is simply just catch of the day on a death. Can't really go wrong with that. Next up, we have Anubis's Grasp. Now, this is a 650 damage hit for 7 pips, and then puts on a 4-round aura that is essentially an infection aura. So, not bad. The thing is, you would just rather go about, you know, countering healing in a different way on a death. Not terrible, could be used in the future perhaps, but I'd say it's like, you know, B tier, C tier at worst. A better card in my opinion is the actual Anubis card, which is a 7 pip 630 burst and then 3 times clear heal for an actual 30% buff aura on the opponent. So I think this spell is actually really insane. I would honestly say this spell is probably A tier because it kind of falls in the middle of the pip range for Vaughn and Pirate, where one's a little expensive, the other one's kind of cheap, and this one's kind of somewhere in the middle. But you do get that additional clear, which is very important as well. And the utility helps you just progress the game. So I think this spell is actually really good. And you might see deaths actually run that over Vaughn and Pirate the next update. Okay, so for the fusion spells, I'm going to try and speed through them pretty quickly because a lot of them are kind of bad. We have Cool Cat, which is a hit and detonate and then clear 3 blades for overtimes on the opponent, which honestly isn't a bad utility. A fire would probably use this card. I don't think it's going to be like insane. I don't think it's that good, but you could definitely get some usage out of it. Not terrible. Lightning Dragon, I think it's easily an A tier card. It's insane damage per pip, and then obviously clearing 2 heals is insane as well. It's essentially a Triton that just does more damage, and you can synergize with the dot, which is pretty cool. Life Oni, I'm gonna have to give this its own tier of just like horrible, like unusable spells. That's a good tier to have here. Just horrible, just bad. Like I don't really think I need to explain this. Death Crow hits and chromatic weaknesses if you have an overtime on. Not bad. I would say like it's honestly A tier, but the thing is it's just not very practical. A lot of the fusion spells aren't, so for that reason I'll have to put it down to B tier, even though the card isn't terrible. Myth Elf, clear weaknesses for 3 overtimes, which is insanely good for 4 pips. This is going to be a staple of Fire PvP. Magma Man, our first S tier fusion spell. This card is absolutely nuts. 6 pips for an insanely high amount of damage. Insane shield break time and pressure. Sets up more than a gambit in 1 turn, and you clear 5 weaknesses. This spell honestly worries me that you might see Ices simply just cosplay fire, because this is a better overtime than actual fires can get currently. Life Leviathan, easily an A tier spell. It's not amazing, like there are better trap counters out there on a storm, of course, but you know, it might be good someday. It's not terrible. Stormzilla, this spell is absolutely horrible. It's between D tier and like unpickable, unusable. I will be a bit generous because, like, you know, a 45 blade is kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, yeah, but no, you just catch of the day, though, that's the thing. You just catch of the day. This spell, it's not good on a storm. Reason being, you don't have resist, you don't get resist, so shields in general just aren't good, and if the opponent hits through them, they do more damage than you do through a shield, numerically speaking. That's how the meta works right now. Also, you're not running Death Dual School on a storm because it's bad. On top of that, the DPP of the spell is bad, and you can't actually get high pierce and high damage unlike the 6 other schools on a storm. So you're not shielding, you're not dueling death, the damage is bad, and the blade you just rather catch the day for or get it some other way that's more viable and practical. Balanced Lord, again, I think this card is simply just like unusable. It's really bad because you have to clear the overtimes, because if you don't clear the overtimes, a fire is simply just going to nuke you, whether it's a Freed or Scion, and you will die before you get to do anything. It's just not good. Fire Medusa, I think this spell is actually B tier. It's not terrible, it's pretty good DPP, and you know, traps to overtimes is not a bad pivot as well. Storm Medusa, insanely good card, insane damage per pip. Gambit's a trap or two for 245 blades, which is insane. Incredible card for a myth. I'd honestly put that probably up in the A tier. It is just so damn good. Ice Minotaur, you're gonna hit and then clear 5 blades for 30 myth traps. Again, not bad, I want to say, just a solid utility. Life Cyclops, this is gonna hit and then put on 30 myth blades if you have overtimes on the opponent. Again, kind of somewhere in the middle. It's not bad, it's kind of mid, but it could be decent in the future. Death Toad, Death Frog, I think this spell is actually pretty solid in my opinion. You can clear 2 heals for pretty cheap and actually get a pretty good buff out of it. Sand Troll, I think this spell is a D tier spell. I don't think it's quite unusable. Like, you could make it work in some situations, but it is like D tier and very close to the unusable tier. Could be decent though in the future. Wildfire Treant. This spell is actually really good in A tier. 4 pips, insanely good damage. You can leverage the dots, clear shields, and get 30 life blades back. Just insanely powerful card. We have another S tier spell, which is going to be the Ice Storm Wyvern. Again, you're just going to see ice get kind of everything in this update, guys. For 5 pips, you do 840 damage. To put that in perspective, guys, a max tier Storm Teacup with a life pip for the same pips only does, I think, 15 more damage than the spell. But Ice just gets it on top of it being an insanely powerful counter. Absolutely insane card. It needs a nerf. It is just nuts. Tundra Lord is going to hit and then Gambit 3 blades for 60 tower shields. Not a bad spell, there's better spells in the game, but definitely could be usable in some scenarios. Storm Force Lord, again, 5 pips for like teacup damage per pip when these schools aren't stormed. Don't really understand that. You can Gambit 3 blades for 30 minus 30 weaknesses, which I think is really good. Myth or Life Centurion, I think this is gonna clear 5 shields for 30 life blades and actually hit for 700 damage. Again, easily A tier, amazing spell. Death Leprechaun, this is gonna hit and clear 3 traps for 25 chromatic weaknesses on the opponent. Kind of similar to the Life Leviathan we saw, but this one is simply just better. So I'd put this one in A tier as well. Balance Force Lord, this spell is just absolutely horrible. Like, I'd say probably, I'd say unusable, but like maybe D tier, because, you know, skills did get nerfed, but I'll be generous and put it like low D tier. Fire Skeletal Dragon, 3 clear shield for 4 pips, 30 death blades back, and really good damage per pip. Honestly, I'd probably say that's an S tier spell right there. I want to say very cheap, clear, solid damage per pip, and you get schools, or sorry, multiple solid blades for your school, which is insanely good. Ghost Touch, this is a 700 damage card that gambits 4 shields for 50 death traps. I would say the spell is honestly pretty good in my opinion. You could just gambit your shields instead of going for an Oni and threaten a lot of pressure with the 50 traps. Storm Ghost, again, insanely high damage per pip card. Gambit 3 weaknesses for basically a 50% aura on the opponent that can last up to 6 rounds, which is honestly pretty good. However, the thing with this one is, again, you could also just 0 pip aura counter it, so I'll knock it down to B tier for that reason. Myth Vampire, this spell, in my opinion, is really good. Simply because it's just vampire, but on steroids. Now you're hitting and buffing instead of hitting and stunning. Life Banshee, I think it's easily a B tier card. It's gonna hit for 400 damage, 4 pips, clear 3 traps, 4 infections on the opponent. Ice Stone Colossus, I'm gonna put this in B tier. Not a terrible spell at all. The issue is Ice just has so many good weakness counters. Just having another one isn't really going to mean a whole lot. Balance Banshee, hands down, just like one of the worst spells in the game, in my opinion. Like, you would just rather pick Banshee at this point, dude. Fire Scorpion, I think I'll put that in C tier. I think it could be decent. Obviously, again, we're excluding the spell infusions, but It could be decent to do this and get like a 1 turn gambit set up on a balance. That could be honestly really cool. Storm, Locust Swarm, I'm gonna probably put this one in D tier as well. It's not bad, but again, the issue is you're not removing the OTs, which is a big deal because if you don't remove them, you're going to die. Polar Swarm, hit and 40 trap per weakness on you. Again, I'd probably put this in like high D tier. It's not bad, but the issue is there are just so much better counters out there in the game. Now we have like a Myth Eyes. It's gonna hit and give you a 30 trap per shield on the opponent. Don't really think it's that good. Typically on a balance, you're gonna want a Power Nova anyways, and Power Nova is literally in the recipe for the spell. So I'd probably say like it's unusable at that point. Leaf Storm, it's gonna hit and do more damage if you have a hot and a dot on. Honestly, not bad. Like you could Hunting Worm into this, which I think is actually pretty solid. So I'll probably put it in like B tier. Ice Earthwalker hits and clear 5 traps for 30 ice traps. Again, A tier spell. A lot of the ice spells are just amazing this update. Death, a balanced Scarab. I'm gonna put this one in C tier. It's not bad because chromatic weaknesses are kind of overvalued right now. But at the same time, it's not amazing because you're not actually removing the buff. Ice, Death, Woolly Mammoth. I think this is an A tier spell easily. Just very, very good damage for clearing 3 for 7 pips and really good utility as well. Sand Colossus, I think, is again just another D tier card. It's really cheap. It's 2 pips for like a 40 trap, which is kind of cool. But at this point, you might as well just spend the extra pip to Wyvern and combo and clear double the effects anyways. The Fire Stormkraken, unusable. Horrible spell, just horrible. I don't know what the devs were thinking putting Fire Stormkraken in the game when they have Magma Man in the same patch. Absolutely delusional. One of the worst spells of the update. Storm Myth Sirens, I would say this is probably an A tier spell. Not bad. The only issue with it really is you're not really packing those spells in particular on a Storm. Stormzilla, again, just not good in my opinion. It's decent, but Stormzilla is just better. And lastly, we have the Bounce Oni, which again is just really, really, really bad. Just unpickable, unusable. Anyways, that's everything for my tier list. Everything at the bottom here we already covered in, you know, a similar point in the video. So that is my tier list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And yeah, that's everything I got. See you later. Take care.